Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to one of the subathon goals we reached. This is Texas Holdem Explained. Maybe you've followed me for a while and you know some of my backstory. I actually played poker full time after I finished college, before I became a streamer. That was kind of the in-between thing that I did. I don't currently play regularly, but that's partly because it's illegal, unless you go to a casino or you're using a VPN or something, which is kind of shady. But poker is a beautiful game, and I'm a big fan of it. And I wanted to kind of break down the basics for you here for poker. This is not meant to be a comprehensive guide that is going to teach you how to be a winning player at whatever bracket. This is mainly a way to inform you so you don't make a fool of yourself or burn through money with false expectations. Poker was an amazing game for me in checking my ego. I'll tell you a story to start this. I studied brain science in college. I got very good grades in school, from elementary school through university. And I'll be honest, I had a bit of an elitist attitude about what I could accomplish and what I could do. And I took some courses in university. One of them was judgments and decision making. And when I took this course, I learned about heuristics, which are the mental shortcuts that we take that save us mental energy and usually get us the right answer in survival situations for hunter-gatherers, but oftentimes run into problems consistently. These are imperfect mental shortcuts. And I was thinking about this, and I was thinking, wow, human brains are very powerful, but they're not optimized for mathematics, for physics, for these really complicated technological things that we do nowadays. It's more so optimized for hunting animals, gathering stuff, fitting into your social group, and surviving in the wild. That's what our brains are mainly for. And we live in a very modern society, and one of the games that people play is poker. And people play poker for real money. And I saw this and I was like, wow, that seems like an amazing opportunity where people who make regular mistakes would play money at this game called poker and just go for it. That seems like something that we could very easily beat and just crush at. So, being the very headstrong idealist that I was at the time, I thought, well, I don't have any debt from college, so what if I just went and tried to build a bankroll in poker? And the way that I got started was going to Canada. I stayed in a hostel in downtown Vancouver for a month. I got a place where we could basically sign a lease and stay there for a year. And I also set up a bank account in Canada because it's not legal to play online poker in most states in the US. So I set all that stuff up, and then I had my laptop with me. The first day that I sat down and I played 4 tables on my laptop, kind of in the 4 corners of my laptop screen. And I'm playing for micro stakes. These are for pennies, where the small blind and the big blind are just pennies, like 5 cent or 10 cent or something. I don't remember the exact values, but I wasn't really putting much at stake here. But I was still losing hard. I was losing very hard. And I had played with some fake money poker on PokerStars, and I felt like I basically knew how the game worked and stuff. And my elitist attitude led me to believe that I was just going to kick ass at this and just be a prodigy and a gamer god. However, poker is a very deep game, and I got slapped in the face. This was an awakening for me. I got so owned at poker that I thought, maybe something's wrong with me. I don't know why I suck so bad at this. So I actually felt so terrible, I went to bed very early at like 7 p.m. and I resolved to not play another hand of poker until I read some threads on the 2+2 forums, which I had heard about being a place where people discuss poker. So the next morning, I go into this forum and I'm reading these threads, and I don't even know the fucking words. I don't know the jargon. I don't know how they're talking about hands. They're saying cutoff and button and hero and villain, and I'm like, what is this lore they're talking about? And that showed me that I knew nothing about poker. So the first step to becoming a reasonably good poker player is, number one, start by admitting you know nothing about poker. And this is actually a pretty hard step because people win sometimes. This is why poker is a winnable game for pros. This is why the local shark at the casino can feed on the new casino goers every week, is because people who are bad and people who play bad win sometimes. This is very different from StarCraft. This is very different from boxing. This is different from American football. In those arenas, you will never have a novice brand new player beat a top level player. But in poker, that can sometimes happen. And that's one of the mental challenges for both good players and bad players. The challenge for bad players is that you win sometimes and you think that you earn that win with good play, when really there are so many probability deals that even a bad player will get rewarded sometimes. So you really have to admit, I know nothing about poker. It is a very complex card game that's super easy to get started in. It's very easy to play because basically they get to your turn and they point at you and they say, okay, what's your move? And you only have a couple simple options. You can fold, which means you just quit out the hand. That's like giving up the hand. You can call, which is to get into the bet by matching whatever is going on. You can check, which means you don't have to add money, but you also don't choose to add more money. Or you can bet, and you can increase the current amount of money that needs to be played there. So because the moves are so simple, you could have, and one of the examples used is dentists. I'm sorry if you're a dentist, I'm not trying to say that you're dumb, but there are people who are very smart in certain parts of their life who have a lot of money, and they'll sit down at a poker table and they'll just want to see lots of hands because it does push that gambling button for people. You get to see the card deal of the flop of 3 cards comes out. You get that nice fun moment of, ooh, how do my 2 cards match up against this board? And did I hit something or did I miss? Or did I almost hit something big, but I need to see the turn in the river? So it gives you a lot of those exciting moments of you got a new probability deal of 2 cards. And then you just got 3 more cards and you get to see how they match. So poker is a game where if you're new, admit that you're bad. That's not something to be ashamed of. It's a very steep and complex game if you get down to the details of it. It's okay. So if you are new, I would recommend treating your poker funds basically like theme park money, where you are going to the theme park and you are spending money that you don't intend to get back for adrenaline and entertainment. That's valid. Totally valid to sit at the poker table, whatever amount that you can afford, as long as you realize that you're not expecting to be competitive and you're not expecting to win. If you do win, that's fun and you can tell people the story about it, but you shouldn't expect to instantly walk into poker and be a professional. So point number 2 about poker that is super important is keep poker bankroll and personal life funds totally separate, completely separate. Never, ever, 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 ever dip into your rent money to sit at a poker table. Ever. Never dip into your bills for your poker money. Never dip into your groceries for your poker money. Anything that's like an excess fund where you have a bit of fun money where you could go to Mario World or Disney World or travel somewhere. If you want to spend that on poker, you can. But never, ever, 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 ever use your real world expenses at the poker table. You should assume that the money that you sit at a poker table with is going to be lost and be fully prepared for that. Super, super separate. Okay, here's another one that's absolutely core to surviving the waves of probability in poker. If you want to be a player who maybe you want to play online for a while and you plan to like make this a hobby for yourself, or you want to go to the casino, that kind of thing, one thing that they recommend is each table sit with 1/20th of your poker bankroll. This is to insulate yourself against bad luck so that if you are legitimately a strong player, you won't just get fucked by variance and just be at zero. So even if, say you have $1,000 and you want to play poker, you shouldn't just go to the casino and spend that $1,000 at one table at one time. It would be smarter to sit at a smaller table, maybe a $200 table, if you wanted to be a little bit risky but not crazy, where it's a $200 buy-in. That way you could lose everything at that table and you're not totally done, because you can get fucked by bad luck. There are what they call bad beats, where you play correctly and you still lose due to some rare occurrence. That does happen, which is why whenever I'm sitting at online tables, I would make sure that I wouldn't just sit at a table where I put all of my bankroll at stake. Even if I could buy into that high table, I would not do so, because I would set a limit for myself of I'm only going to go for a buy-in if it's 1/20th of my total bankroll. That allowed me to go from micro stake, which is playing for pennies, to small and low stakes, which is playing for dollars for the small blind and big blind. I'll talk about the positions and what all the stuff is in a minute here, but this is just the really important financial stuff here. Poker bankroll, absolutely separate from real life expenses, no exceptions. Expect to lose the money. If you're not a full-time career poker player, it is gambling. It is effectively gambling. It's exciting, it can be fun, so treat it like a roller coaster. Roller coaster of emotion, roller coaster of outcomes, that kind of thing. And then this is the bankroll management tip here. And then tip number 4, I would say, would be to have a plan. Let's make this one green, because those are kind of like the red yikes. The red yikes don't do those things. This one is have a plan for hands you intend to play. So, as you can see behind me, this is a range chart. These are the hands that you can start with in poker. I have a lovely deck of cards here as well, if you want a nice visual aid. These are cards. Poker uses a normal 52 card deck with the jokers removed. So if you have jokers, those don't go into it. You can take those out. Just to knock out a frequently asked question, can you count cards in poker? No, not in the sense of how you can count them in blackjack, because the poker hand itself doesn't use the full deck and the deck is shuffled, or a different deck is used with every hand. So you can't just say, well, because in the last hand this happened, therefore the next hand. It's a fresh set of cards every time, basically. So knocking that out of the way. But you can be dealt, in Texas Holdem, at the beginning, you're dealt 2 cards. And if you look at the chart behind me, the red ones are going to be the best. Those would be hands that you might play. You might play these hands in whatever position you're at the table. How many different hands you play depends on how late you are to act. So if you look up here at the top here, there's the late position of the cutoff and the button. The dealer button looks like this. It says dealer on it. This might be inverted, I'm not sure. But the dealer button is the very last to act. And that means that you have position. The reason you have position by being last to act is you can see all the different moves that everyone did ahead of you, which informs your decision more so than theirs. What's the opposite of being the last to act? That's being the first to act, which is called under the gun. And that might sound intimidating and scary. That's because it's a very scary and bad position. It's the worst position to be in, because you're the first to act. That means you have no information about how anyone else is feeling about their hand, and you have to basically make your decisions first. So there are 2 terms that are kind of contrasting with each other. You've got tight and you've got loose. Tight range means fewer hands, fewer cards, you're making less moves and you're folding more. Loose means you're betting more, you're playing more, you're more active. So when you're early, you should play more tight and more reserved because you're in a bad spot. When you're late, you can play more open, you can play a few more hands in your range, and because you have more information on what everyone else is doing. So let's just look at some of these hand combos and think about what they could bring you at the flop and just which the best and the worst hands are in poker. As a fun question for the chat, what is the very worst poker hand you can start with? The 2-card start, what is the number 1 worst hand? Just to break down this language for you in this chart, I can just maximize this for now, I guess. Okay. O indicates offsuit. S indicates suited. That means this ace queen, they're of the same suit. It could be 2 spades, 2 diamonds, 2 hearts, 2 clubs, but they're suited. That means it's easier to hit a flush. Offsuit, it's much harder to hit a flush. Flushes are rare anyway, so don't get too excited. Chat is correct. 7-2 offsuit is the worst hand in poker. That means that should be the easiest fold pre-flop. Here's another thing about folding. One of the ways you can tell if someone is poopy trash garbage at poker is if they call a bunch. Calling is probably the worst move in poker. And you might say, why is calling such a bad move? Calling is agreeing to what other people have decided are the terms, and you're not setting terms for yourself. Folding is a strong move. It's not a cowardly move. It's a smart move. If you have a hand like 7-2 offsuit that is ass garbage terrible, the reason 7-2 offsuit is so bad is because they're the 2 lowest cards that can't form a straight, which is 5 in a row, as in like 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 7, you can't connect with that. It's ass. It's really bad. So those are the easy folds. These bad hands, easy folds. If you're looking at this chart here, they would recommend, at least this is one example of a hand range you could play. The red are the hands that you might play. The blues, fold them. The greens, fold them. They're going to put you into really confusing and awkward situations in the flop, even if you do connect. And I'll just give you an example here. What if you have Queen 6 suited? Queen 6 suited. Okay, you got to the flop with Queen 6 suited. And now there's a queen on the board, and you have a pair of queens. That's a pair. But you lose to Queen 7, Queen 8, Queen 9, Queen 10, Queen Jack, Queen Queen, Queen Jack off. You lose to so many other hands that also hit a queen. Ace Queen you lose to, King Queen you lose to, Ace Queen off, King Queen off. You lose to all those hands. And those situations feel really icky to lose too, because you did connect, but your companion card was so trash that you lost due to your companion card. That's why you fold these hands. So if you're going into a casino, if you want to try playing poker, you should, like I said in the point, have a plan of the hands you intend to play. And if you want to get advanced, you could have a plan for the hands you intend to play per position. So when you're later to act, you could play a few more of the hands. Like maybe you mix in the Queen 9 suit or something. Like you edge it a little bit more out, but you wouldn't play like random trash over here. But you could expand your range a little bit. Or if you're early to act, you compress your range a little bit and you fold more. So folding is a strong move, and folding is the move that you make pre-flop 80% or more of the time. And that's not a bad thing. That's you protecting yourself from getting invested into a bad hand. That's smart poker. You've heard the song, know when to hold 'em, know when to fold 'em. Folding them is a life skill. Knowing when to get out of something that's not going well for you is a life skill, and it's super important in poker. And it doesn't make you a coward or a bad player if you're not going in on a hand. That just means you understand the limitations of the hand and you've decided that it's really not worth playing. So know what your hand ranges are, know what you're going to be willing to play, and then know how those hands relate to other hands that people might be willing to play. When you get a hand, let's just deal out a few example 2-card pairs to myself. So I have the deck of cards here, and I'm just gonna throw down 2 cards, and let's see if I would fold this hand pre-flop, or if I would play it. All right, 1 card here. We got an ace of diamonds. 2nd card here, an ace of hearts. I probably didn't shuffle this deck. Rockets is what they call this. Ace is the best hand in the game. It is the #1 top best hand in the whole video game or in-person tabletop card game. And you might be like, whoa, aces, but that can't hit a straight or whatever. It technically could. But pre-flop, this is a monster hand. And I played poker for 3 years, I think. And if I go to my Holdem manager stats, aces made me the most money. And I'll show you how to extract value with aces. If you have aces pre-flop, it doesn't matter what position you're in, you are God. There is no hand that beats you. Other ace pair would tie you, but the odds of that happening are very low, and it would split the pot anyway. So we've got aces. Do we, option 1, fold them? Fuck no. Option 2, do we call or check if we're at the big blind? Fuck no. We bet every time. We bet every time you have aces because you want to build a pot. You want to apply pressure. Placing bets is like doing a timing attack. It's like you're at a strong point and you want to deal damage. You have the best hand in the game, you bet. And you might be wondering, how much do I bet? What I would recommend, at least this is how I played, and if you're a poker player and you're a pro, feel free to weigh in the YouTube comments. I won't be mad. I'm not perfect at the game, and maybe you have a cool strat or know some shit that I don't. Whatever. I would typically bet 3x the big blind or 4x the big blind, depending on the vibe of the room and how other people are betting. But you want to start to build value if you have a good hand. But you want that bet to be consistent across all hands that you're willing to play so you don't give away your hand. So I wouldn't bet 6x the pot when I have aces and then bet 3x the pot when I have queens. That would be sus. They would be like, you haven't bet 6x the pot, or the big blind, sorry. You haven't bet 6 times the big blind this whole night, but now you suddenly did that. They would be suspicious and they would think, okay, this person probably has a good hand. So let's say I have the aces and I bet 3 times the big blind, just with my normal pre-flop bet to start to apply pressure and to start to get value for my hand. If anyone raises my bet, if they raise it, you want to raise again because you have the best hand in the game, or you could just all in if you think that they're really eager to fight you. Because people will sometimes all in with kings, with queens, or even with jacks occasionally. Or they're just crazy and they're all in with some bad hand. But if you have aces and you get all in pre-flop and someone agrees to that, that's the best case scenario for you. You can technically lose, but you did the correct move. And this touches on one of the most difficult parts of poker, which is losing when you played well. And that's something that doesn't happen in StarCraft. You can play a poker hand technically perfectly, and you can still lose due to bad luck. You have to be able to just soak those. Just admit, and this is one of the main things that's a fundamental of poker, is you have to accept variance. Variance is like the rising and the falling of the waves. Sometimes it's on your side and sometimes it's not. But a good poker player is like a good surfer, where they ride that wave and they don't get smashed by it. That's the idea. So this is an example of the best possible hand. Let me shuffle this deck here. Oh, it does look shuffled. Wow, I got really lucky. Okay. I will shuffle it a little bit just to be safe. We're going to shuffle this, and let's just throw out a couple other example hands and see, would we fold these or would we play these hands? Okay. The deck is somewhat shuffled. All right. We get... That's not a good shuffle. I got the ace again. We'll shuffle it properly. Variance is like Poseidon, pretty much. Okay. I'm going to add this to the take-home study notes here. Have a plan for hands you intend to play. Know what bet size you'll use pre-flop. I do 3x to 4x big blind. Generally.
Yeah, whoa, whoa, yeah,
Thank you for the support. A chicken.
whoa, dude, whoa, whoa.
Okay. Shuffle it one more time, and then I will get some examples. Poker players like a surfer, exactly. Okay. We have a 9 of spades and a 4 of hearts. Fold, call, or bet. Easy fold. Next two, a 9 of hearts and a 6 of clubs. Poop. Fold it. An ace of hearts. Ooh. A 2 of hearts. Ace 2 suited. It's pretty good. That beats a lot of other flushes. So this could be okay to play. As you can see, it's the very worst of the ace X suited cards. But it's better than king 2 suit. It's better than these other cards here. So it's all right. Might play this hand. This might be an edge case one depending on your position. But it's all right. 7 of diamonds. Ace of diamonds. That's better than the previous hand. Pretty good. Could play it. 4 of spades. And an ace of clubs. Ace 4 offsuit for this range of hands is a no-go. You're not going to be able to really hit flushes. You could potentially hit a low straight, but it's not that good of a hand. 6 of diamonds. 6 of spades. We got a pair. One of the best ways to make money at a casino, if you're a new player, is to hit trips at the flop. That's one of the best ways to surprise people and make some money. And I'm not telling you this is how you're going to make money as a pro player over the long term. But if you're just someone who wants to casually play a poker game, and like I said, you followed rules 1 and rule number 2, and you're just there to have a good time, if you have a pair of 6s and the flop has a 6 in it, and there's a king or an ace or something, that's a good time for you to get really heavily invested in the pot if people are playing back at you. Because trips at the flop is a very strong hit, and many people will play aggressively with a big pair. They might be excited that they have a pair of aces, a pair of kings, a pair of queens, a pair of jacks, a pair of tens, whatever. And if you have trips, that's a really, really big advantage over them. I would say when I've played at casinos, that's one of the times where I tend to collect. Because I have the pair pre-flop, you hit the 3 of a kind, and then if you can really push hard, a lot of people will get into the action with you. So starting with the pair is very good. Again, if you have a strong hand, you should be aggressive. You should bet. Having these 6s means I do want to bet pre-flop. I want to start building the pot. Because if I hit at the flop and I hit those trips, then yeah. Do you mean sets? Is that the technical term for it? Did I miss up the technical term? 3 of a kind is what I'm talking about. All right. We've got another hand here. 8 of clubs. Queen of diamonds. Queen 8 off. Fold. Jack of hearts. Ace of spades. Ace jack off. That is a play hand based on this particular range, but it's kind of near the edge. Not super strong. Ace jack, you could hit a pair. You could hit a pretty high straight with that. Ace is also a high card, too, so if no one connects with anything. You hit a set with a pocket pair, trips, or 2 on the board. Oh, okay. Thank you. That's a very technical term, but the the total hand that you have is the same. There's a joker in here. I forgot to remove that. 5 of spades. Sets are more disguised. Yeah, true. People are going to be less worried about them if they only see one card of that type on the board. Good point. Thank you for mentioning that. 9-5 offsuit. Fold. Garbage. 2-6 offsuit. Fold. Garbage. 3-3. Play. Maybe you hit a set. 7-2 offsuit. The worst hand in the game. 2-10 offsuit. Fold. King, Jack offsuit. Ooh, close. Just barely we play it. So it's not super strong, but it's all right. 2 pretty meaty face cards. 7-3 offsuit. Garbage. Jack 8 suit. Jack 8 suit. Fold. Still a fold. Even though they're suited, even though they hit a straight, they lose to so many other things. It's not that good. Queen 10 off. Do we play it? Nope. Just barely don't play it based on this range. And again, this is only one example range. Your range could be looser or tighter depending on your situation. Also, forgot to mention this, but if you are deep stacked at a table, that's in you've been winning a lot, you can loosen a little bit and play a little bit more of the hands if you want to, just to have more chances to beat people, just because you can afford that as you are deep stacked at the table. But that's more of an advanced move. I think just for starting out, it's better to kind of stick to whatever range you've decided. And then I guess another thing about poker that's a big fundamental, we've gone through a bunch of the starting hands. You kind of get the idea. You fold most of them. And if you do have a decent hand, you want to start building value in the pot by betting. You really want to bet. If you have good stuff, you want to bet. You want to put pressure on people to get the bad hands out. And if they stay in, they're behind and you're ahead, which is great. So the other thing is try to get a read on your opponents. So aggressive versus defensive. You'll have all kinds of different players at the poker table. You will have people who are super scared to play anything. There are people who would not even play this range of hands. They'll cut the king 9 to king jack suit. They'll cut all of this out. They'll cut all of this out. And they'll only play pairs. And they'll only play this. They'll play something like this, where it's just a couple lines of cards. They'll play the kings, they'll play the queens, maybe this corner here they'll play, but they'll cut out all this. That's what they call a mouse or a nit. Someone who's very scared and they only want to play a small number of hands. The thing is, for a nit, you can steal a lot of the blinds from them if you're on the dealer button or on the cutoff. So if you're late to act here, dealer button, or at the cutoff, and you see there's a nit here, or even here, you can bet 3x the pot just to take their blind, because they don't want to get into a hand they don't want to call. They have very strict range that they're going to follow, and they don't want to play unless they have a really good starting hand. There are people who play like that. So against them, if they do play at you, fucking run. Run! Get out. Fold. Take a bathroom break, escape the situation, because they have a very strong hand. Because they play so tight and so careful. So when they do act, you'd be like, oh God, you have a grenade. That kind of a thing. The opposite end of the kind of player personality would be what they call an aggro monkey. Someone who is just throwing chips all around the table. They're in all the hands. They're talking shit. They're raising people. They're like betting all over the place. They're really aggressive, putting lots of pressure on people. But they're playing potentially all the hands. They're playing like a huge range here. Where like just 3/4 of all hands, they'll just play them. Which means that if you have a good hand, you're going to fight it out with them and it's going to be kind of stressful. But they're going to go into a lot of situations with garbage, and they're also going to bluff a lot because they're just trying to see outcomes, and they're trying to scare people out of hands. So for each of these player archetypes, you want to think about, what is my counter style? I stream mainly StarCraft, and the things that I talk about with StarCraft and poker have a lot of commonality in, if you're against someone who is super aggressive, you can counter them by being smartly defensive, not sparing the cost of building those defensive structures, making a few units to defend their push, and reacting to their aggression with strong defense and not venturing too far forward. The flip side is, if they're playing really greedy and just showing up in a lot of hands, whenever you do have something good, you should punish them hard by building the pot a bunch and then taking all their money. So you need to figure out who the tight players are, who the loose players are, and you need to figure out how to play a counter style to beat their style. And then this is the other factor. You should also have at least some sense of their skill level. I'm going to actually put a comma here. Skill level from low to high. You can, if you're a little bit experienced with poker, you can get some sense of who knows what they're doing and who's poopy garbage, just based on the kind of moves they make, based on their bet sizing, based on maybe their confidence. There are some people who are falsely confident and they're actually bad, but from when I've been at the tables, it usually ends up being pretty obvious who knows how to play poker, at least to a decent level, and who doesn't. This is another point here. Develop counter strats to their play styles. And number 8 is avoid strong players. This one is kind of hard for people to do, especially if you have a lot of confidence and maybe some ego. So this is one of the reasons why I actually didn't like grinding poker. And that's because you don't really want to be in hands with other very skilled poker players, because you have to work way harder to even win, much less break even. So yeah, it's one of those things where you kind of just respect the other sharks in the pool and you eat the fish. That's the mindset of how you want to be when you're trying to win at the poker table. You want to find out who the bad players are and counter them and punish them hard to get yourself deep stacked, so then you can fight the best players at the table if you have to, but ideally you avoid them because they give you a lot more work than they're really worth. It's kind of like two sharks fighting each other. One shark could win, but it could be pretty hurt by the end of it. You really want to try to figure out who the bad player is at the table and just punish them consistently until they're dead. So avoiding strong players is a key skill. In StarCraft and in other games that involve matchmaking, you're supposed to fight the toughest opponents you can. So it's a bit of an opposite in terms of the endeavor there. Tournament play is a little bit different, but I would argue that still, as you're advancing through the tournament and getting to the final table, you do want to extract value from the bad players and you want to protect yourself against the good players. So if you're ever at kind of an edge case situation where there's a strong player who's kind of playing back at you and stuff, you can just avoid them. It doesn't really cost you much to fold. If you're pre-flop, the worst case scenario is you fold the big blind and you give up those 2 chips. That's the worst case scenario. You could maybe bet and then they raise you. You have the option to fold that, so I guess that might be losing a little bit more money. But basically, farm the bads, avoid the goods. Pretty straightforward stuff for how you want to navigate the table. Another thing is disregard table talk or give it a heavy discount. The people at the poker table are not your friends. They're not here to help you. They're here to sell you a used car that is so absolutely on the last thread of being completely busted and totaled, and they want to make you feel very good about that purchase. So people will say all kinds of stuff to get into your head. If you're playing live poker, they'll talk mad shit. They'll maybe fluff you up sometimes and try to make you feel like you're very smart and butter you up and get you into a bad situation. So these people are not here to help you. Maybe you have a friend at the poker table, that's a little bit different, but if you're just going to a place and someone's very charismatic and charming and talking to you, that's a spell they're casting on you, and you need to protect yourself with a barrier of some kind. So table talk is something that does happen. Like in video games, trash talk is allowed until you get thrown out of the casino, I guess. But yeah, that's something that will happen. Body language is also a thing. It's kind of related to this, of be aware of your own body language. I'll be the first to admit I didn't really study live poker as much as I studied online poker. So I wasn't really focused on that. I was mainly focused on collecting information on my opponents and then making decisions based on the hand history that I had saved to my computer. If you play online poker, with every hand you get a text file of what happened in the hand, and that just feeds into your program, Holdem Manager, whatever version they have out now, and that tells you, okay, this person is more tight, this person is more loose, etc. Basically, for all of that, you want to make sure that if you hit something really big on the flop, you don't go, oh, that's awesome, even if that's how you feel on the inside. And then if you miss hard and you were really hoping to hit correctly, but the board is just a really big miss, you don't say, oh, damn, I missed, unless you're trying to fake them out and lie to them. So poker is a game of deception. It's not a game of honesty. You're meant to be dishonest as you can, either by hiding information or by giving them false information. The only way that you really want to be honest is, okay, you don't want to be honest. You want to basically have a shield of consistent betting behaviors that is difficult for your opponent to pry through and comprehend. That's basically the breakdown here. Okay, let's go to number 11 here, which may be the most important of all of them. And let's do a nice, let's do a light blue here. Accept variance. Good luck and bad luck. Visit all. Okay, this is one of the things that destroys many poker players, or it deceives bad poker players into thinking that they're good poker players. And that is, sometimes you just have a streak of unlucky situations, or you have a streak of lucky situations, but the deal of probability is not an indication of your skill. Just because you had a lucky night at the poker table doesn't mean you're a good player. Just because you had a bad night doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad player, but you could be a bad player. Variance is one of the things that also makes it very hard to be a long-term career poker player. I will share with you the most tilting hand of my career. It was online poker, and I think I had a flush. This is kind of vaguely from memory, but I had a very, very strong hand. And I think the only hand that could beat me was 4 of a kind, and my opponent had 3 of a kind. And I put them all in at the turn. So the river had only 1 card that could save them and give them the better hand. Of all the rest of the cards in the deck, I would win. But if that 1 card showed up, they would win. And because I put them all in, that was a very good move by me, because I'm going to win in almost every case except for that 1. And you know what happened? The 1 card showed up. And they took my stack from that online poker table. All of it. Because I was all in. And maybe they felt smart in that moment. It was very dumb of them to do that. It was wishful. And they wished upon a star. And they got that super rare outcome, which allowed them to win the hand. And it was frustrating for me. Because I was like, how could they do this? I've seen streamers talk in these kinds of terms. How could they be so silly to invest this much in the hand when only 1 card could save them? And the answer is, they're not really thinking in those terms. A lot of players get into these poker hands not thinking about the number of outs they have. They're just there to maybe catch something cool. That's about it. That's the extent of their reasoning. So Yeah, it's a bit of a mess in poker some of the time. Some people will invest heavily in a situation that's going to lose most of the time, but they get lucky. So you just have to accept that, because variance is one of the things that allows better players to win over time, because newer players think that they are good at poker. You can sort of tell by how people talk about their poker hands whether they're actually skilled or not. Because it's really entertaining to hear people tell stories of getting into some hand with some ramshackle starting hand of king 8 offsuit, and they hit some weird double pair or something, and then it was a weird set of bets from the flop to the turn to the river, and they win in the end, and they're proud of themselves. And you're like, wow, you're proud when you played that badly. That's amazing. That's how professionals make a living, from people like that. So don't be a person like that unless you accept that you're doing it for the adrenaline. So kind of zooming out to the whole big picture of these are the reasons you could get into poker. Reason number 1 is adrenaline and excitement, and that's valid. This is fun money spending, like going to the theme park. Reason number 2 is you want to take a shot at earning revenue with poker. And doing this means, point number 12, you need to remain a student. You need to be a student of the game over time. You need to study your hands. You need to study your betting lines. And you need to sculpt your gameplay in such a way that it consistently gets refined over time, where you learn from your mistakes, not just your gameplay mistakes, but also your emotional mistakes. Whenever you get a little bit tilted during a session and it causes you to play in a way that doesn't fit with going to number 4, it doesn't fit with your plan if you're tilted. So remaining a student is super, super important. A lot of people get to a certain level of skill and then they feel cocky. They feel like they're good now. And if they lost, then the rest of it was variance. But the real winning play is to always admit that you are still a student of the game and that there's still much for you to learn. And whenever you lose, you say, okay, maybe I lost this hand. Was there a time when I should have folded? Or was my bet sizing wrong and I should have bet different amounts? One thing that I would do when I was playing online was I would basically play a session. Actually, I'll back up. I would wake up, have my breakfast and coffee. You don't want to go in on an empty stomach. Breakfast and coffee. And I would read from a poker book. I would read just to get myself in the student mindset. And I would take notes. So I have a book that's open and I have a pencil and paper and I'm writing notes in my book. Okay, this is getting me in the student mindset. And once I felt like I had my breakfast and my coffee and I'm ready to go, I would go and I would play hands for a few hours, maybe 2 to 3 hours. Not a super long session. I wanted to make sure I was focused and with it and really thinking about each of the hands. And after those hours of a session, I would go through the largest pot size hands and just study the betting line. Even if I won, maybe I could have gained a little bit more money if I took a different betting line to get there. If I lost, was there a way that I could have lost less? So it's increasing what you gain from your winnings and it's reducing what you lose from your losses. But winnings and losses are both a part of putting in a lot of hands. So it's the preparation with study and getting in the right mindset. It's the actual gameplay of participating in the hands and trying to make the right moves. And then it's the review after of studying what did I do right, what did I do wrong, and how can I be stronger tomorrow. If you are not studying poker books and guides and combing through threads online and reading about the game, you are not a student of the game and you're not taking it seriously. You can't expect human intuition to cause you to be a winning poker player. There are too many people that are working way harder than that to be a successful poker player for you to just show up and just win with your godly intuition. That's not how it works. Bad players will win sometimes, and you may confuse that as being your skill. But poker is a very, very hard game. If you want to play it seriously, you need to take it seriously and you need to read like a student does. And you need to analyze your play And you need to be pretty strict with yourself in calling out whenever you make mistakes that were your fault. Additionally, being able to take breaks is really important, knowing when you're not in the best mental state to play and not playing during those times is also very important. Insulating yourself against bad luck by managing your bankroll and not sitting with everything you have just because you can sit at that table. That means that even if you do get a bad beat, you're not done. You just soak that and you say, yep, that's part of the bad luck, but because I have good bankroll management, I can still continue to play poker. I think the main book that I read for strategy, let me check here. I think I can find an Amazon link for you. This is a bit older. Let's see if it's here. Yeah, Building a Bankroll Full Ring Edition. This was probably my main book that I considered to be the most useful. Posting the link in the chat here. If you're looking at this from the YouTube comments, the book is called Building a Bankroll Full Ring Edition. And it's by Paweł Nazarewicz. Looks like a Polish last name. Very, very good book. Very mathematically based. It has a lot of these range charts. Like you see here, he breaks it down by different positions and that kind of a thing. And then the other main book that I would recommend that's totally on mindset is The Mental Game of Poker by Jared Tendler. There are a lot of games, or a lot of books, sorry, that are just on tilt management in poker. And this one was the best one for me. So some of them are more kind of vague and spiritual in how they write about stuff. This one was written by a sports psychologist, so it feels a little bit more down to earth and just simple to me. More straightforward, more direct, more sciencey kind of feeling. Those were the two main books that, of the different books that I read, I revisited them the most, and I felt like they were the most core to my approach to the game of poker. So I would highly recommend those. The poker meta has been evolving since I've been playing online, so you should double check like what is the latest Holdem manager software that the pros are using if you're going to play online, and then what is my strategy. Just generally speaking, you should know a strategy for yourself, and then have fun and be able to lose sometimes and not really take that too personally. Just think about what was the situation and was there anything that I could have done differently that would have improved my situation. It's pronounced Nazarewicz. Thank you for the correction there. Appreciate that. Mental Game of Poker is based. Yes, and this sports psychologist is actually someone who's helped out Team Liquid as well. So there is quite a bit of demand in esports for mental game coaching, largely because many esports athletes have some of the very worst mindsets in all of competition. It doesn't have the same long-standing tradition of conventional sports like American football, soccer, cross-country, things like this where they've been chipping away at how to think about the situations for a long time. Esports is very new, and a lot of the people in esports are young adults with maybe less experience in athletics and working with a team. So Jared Tendler is doing a lot of really awesome work in talking to poker pros about the mental difficulties they face, talking to esport athletes and how the different situations they face can be hard for them, and trying to get people in the right mindset to succeed. So this has been my Texas Hold'em Explained, fairly simple sort of guide on the things to watch out for. Just maybe to round things off, we could play an example hand. I can just throw down some cards here and talk through it. Let's say we have 6 people at a table. You can have 6 or 8 or whatever. But you've got the small blind, you've got the big blind, and then let's deal out some cards and just see who would have won the hand and what would have happened. I apologize, this is not on screen right now, but I will dictate this to you verbally. So I'm going to shuffle the deck. We've got the dealer button, the small blind, and the big blind. Let's get some Twitch viewers to be assigned to the different spots here for fun. I'm shuffling the deck. It's important to shuffle the deck. Watch the movie Rounders, it's awesome. It's a pretty good poker movie. I think it's much better than Casino Royale. Casino Royale, I made a video breaking down the poker scene in that movie. It's so painful to watch because basically, to break down the Casino Royale poker hand in a nutshell, all the players at the table had such astronomically jacked hands, and the main protagonist of the movie and the villain ended up having the two strongest hands, and the protagonist just ended up having the best hand. But there wasn't really outplaying. It was just a sequence of more and more ridiculously overpowered hands. Rounders is a lot more realistic in outplaying people. Like the final scene where he's playing against the main boss guy, it's got some good poker in it. So Rounders I would recommend as a good poker movie. Casino Royale is more of just a poker scene for people who don't know anything about poker, with a bunch of facial expressions of the different characters looking very sternly at each other. All right. So we've got small blind. We've got Harold the Ninth. You have two cards here. You have been dealt a 10 of spades and a queen of spades. Queen 10 suit could be a playable hand. On the big blind, we have Woogie Esports. You have a 4 of clubs and a king of hearts. Under the gun, we have JW with a queen ace offsuit. Middle position, we've got pocket threes. Wow. This is Guacamole's hand. Congrats. And then in the cutoff, we've got Osiris with the king jack suited. Also a pretty strong hand. Wow, this is stacked. And then on the dealer button, we've got, what do we have? Go J Dean. You have a 9-6 suited of spades. Great. Look at these cards here. So let's say pre-flop is happening. The first action would be to JW. He's under the gun. He has ace queen offsuited. If we were taking just this chart here, we'll just play this out automatically based on what the lovely chart is telling us. JW here has a strong hand. Ace queen off is pretty strong. He would bet. This is good. He's got a good hand. Ace is a good card. Queen is a good card. He's going to bet 3x the big blind. Now, who do we have? We've got the threes next. That's pretty strong. That's pretty strong. What would the threes do here? Should the threes raise or should they call the bet? That's one of the tough decision points. You have a pair. Do you want to raise pre-flop? 3 is a pair, but it's not a high pair. What kind of face does he make while betting the 3x? Let's say this person calls. It's a pair, but it's not a high pair. You don't have rockets. You're not shoving pre-flop. So let's say they call. The king jack suited. Would they call? They probably wouldn't fold. That's a pretty good hand. Would they raise? Maybe not. Maybe they also call, which could be a weak move, but we've got people in the hand. 3 people in the hand so far, and then the 9-6 suited. If I was in the dealer button, 9-6 suited, I would fold this. There are potentially 3 strong hands here. 9-6 suited, it's a no. It's not a playing hand here. So the dealer button player is out, and then we've got Harold the Ninth on the small blind with Queen 10 suited. Would you match the bet or would you fold here? Queen 10 suited, there was a bet and 2 calls. Personally, I would fold this. Queen 10 suited is pretty strong, but not really strong enough that I would want to be that early to act here. So I would fold this personally. And then the King 4 suited big blind would also probably fold. All right, so that was the pre-flop action. We got the bet from JW. So we have a Queen Ace offsuit. We have a pair of 3s. And we have a King Jack suited. The small blind and the big blind go to the pot, as do the bets from these 3 players. Too risky of a biscuit. We're going to get out of this biscuit. Okay. Let's get a flop going here. We've got the first card, an 8 of diamonds. The second card, a 4 of diamonds. The third card, a 5 of hearts. So this is what you would probably call a pretty dry board. A wet board is one where a lot of good stuff could connect to it. A dry board is where not a lot of good stuff would connect to it. And the reason I would call this a dry board is because the cards are low and there's 2 of one suit, but it's not 3 of one suit, so there couldn't be a guaranteed flush right away. 8, 4, 5. So basically everyone missed. The person who's probably the most excited would be the King Jack suited, but technically the 3s are in the lead right now. The 3s are the strongest hand. So if you have Ace Queen offsuit on this board, you could do what's called a continuation bet. A continuation bet is whenever you were the person who started the aggression and you just continued the aggression, just to check and see what people are doing. This is sort of like a harass move that gets you a scout meanwhile. So the Ace Queen suit, let's say JW just says, that's a pretty shitty board. I bet a lot of people missed. I'm just going to go ahead and continuation bet. So if you continuation bet here, the pair of 3s might say, hey, that could be a continuation bet, and I think you might have missed. They could continue to participate in this, and they could call. The King Jack suit, many players really want to get a flush because it's a very strong hand. Maybe they call as well, and we go to the turn. We go to the turn, the 3s are in the lead. The turn is an 8 of clubs, which is just not really that fitting for much on the board. Technically, a 6-7 would have hit a straight at the flop. You could bluff that, potentially. You could act like, oh, I have 6-7 and I just hit it. 6-7 is pretty rare to play, so some people might not buy it, but that's a potential bluff situation. We got an 8 of clubs, so now the 3s have a 2 pair. This didn't make a flush for our double diamond player. The Ace Queen person only has high card ace. So all we've got now is 2 pair for the person who started with the 3s. Let's say JW checks here, because nothing much has happened, or they could continuation bet and just keep investing in this hand, but it's going to feel kind of bad with high card ace. Let's say that all these players just get to the river and we'll see what happens. And the final card here is a King of clubs. So ultimately, the King Jack ended up with the strongest hand, but they needed to call many times to get there. And in many cases, they would have missed that card and they would have had nothing at all. They would have lost to the high card ace and they would have lost to the pair of 3s. So they went from having the worst hand to the best hand by the end. And that's one of the reasons why applying pressure with heavy bets is so important in poker, is because you really want to try to push out those hands that are just hoping for something rare. And if they do hit something that's rare, then that's fine for you because you will win most of the time in those situations. So this is an example hand of how things can go. As you can see, a lot of times you're in a situation where you don't quite have a very good hand, and it's hard to tell if you have the best hand or not. And that really points to the complexity and the depth of the amazing and beautiful game of poker. It's a very stressful game, it's a very hard game, and it's also a risky game when it comes to pushing some people's gambling buttons and making them very excited. So going back to the bullet points here just for a review. Start by admitting you know nothing about poker, even if you think you know a couple things about it. Just admit that it's a very deep and complex game, and you are but a simple sailor in a vast ocean of numbers, probability, and cards and situations. Point number 2, keep your poker bankroll and personal life funds totally separate, always. Amen. Point number 3, each table sit with 1/20th or a quarter, whatever, it depends on how risky you want to be, of your total poker bankroll so you don't just get fucked by bad luck. Point number 4, have a plan for hands you intend to play. like this lovely chart here. You should decide ahead of time which hands are good, which hands are garbage. Number 5, know what bet size you want to use for your pre-flop bets. And then once you get to the flop and stuff, know, am I betting half the pot? Am I betting the full pot? Things like that. Try to get a read on your opponents. Is this an aggressive player? Is this a defensive player? Is this a loudmouth who's trying to rustle my Jimmy Jam Jims? Is this a high skill player? Is this a low skill player? Number 7, play a counter strat to their style. Number 8, avoid strong players. Kind of doesn't really fit with the Viking mythos of try to fight the strongest people you can in glory and battle and all that. If there's a very difficult warrior, just run away. Run away. Don't fight them. Fight someone else. Beat up on some undergeared peasant. That's how poker works. Number 9, disregard table talk. Give it a heavy discount. They're trying to sell you shit. Do not buy it. Number 10, be aware of your own body language. That's why a lot of people wear hats and sunglasses. They try to conceal that stuff. Number 11, accept variance. There's a lot of good luck and bad luck in this game, and that stuff is independent of player skill. Good players have good luck and bad luck. Bad players have good luck and bad luck. This is something that we all share in life and in poker. And number 12, remain a student. There's always more you can learn about the game. There's always more you can polish about your betting lines. There's always more that you can refine about your mental game and about your practice routine. So I hope this breakdown was useful to you. Again, this is not a complete and comprehensive guide of poker. Any winnings or losses that you have at the poker table, I'm not to be held legally responsible for. And also, if I got anything wrong during this video, feel free to leave me a scathing review in the comments. But thank you everyone for supporting the Neuro Subathon 2. I'm glad that I got to share some things that I learned from poker when I played back in the day with all of you. I think it's a very beautiful game. It might be cool to do poker content at some time, but I'm not sure about the legality of playing it here in Seattle just for my home. But depending on laws and so on and so forth, I'm not opposed to potentially playing poker in the future. But thank you all once again, and this has been Texas Hold'em Explained with Neuro. Thank you.